Evo Morales, the first indigenous president of Bolivia and a leftist, was ousted a few months back in a suspicious way that many suspected was undemocratic, but the media kept repeating that he resigned because of election fraud. But the Washington Post did an extensive look into this, and they found that no, everyone on the left who was suspicious about this being election fraud, they were actually right, and the Trump administration and all the other people who repeated this in mainstream media, they were the ones who were wrong. So Morales claimed victory in October's election, but the opposition protested about what it called election fraud. A November 10th report from the Organization of American States, OAS, noted election irregularities, which leads the technical audit team to question the integrity of the results of the election on October 20th. Police then joined the protests and Morales sought asylum in Mexico. The military-installed government charged Morales with sedition and terrorism. A European Union monitoring report noted that some 40 former election officials have been arrested and face criminal charges of sedition and subversion, and 35 people have died in the post-electoral conflict. The highest polling presidential candidate, a member of Morales' MAS-IPSP party, has received a summons from prosecutors for undisclosed crimes, a move some analysts suspect was aimed to keep him off the ballot. The media has largely reported the allegations of fraud as fact, and many commentators have justified the coup as a response to election fraud by MAS-IPSP. However, as specialists in election integrity, we find that the statistical evidence does not support the claim of fraud in Bolivia's October election. So more details after that, but what do you guys think? I'll open that up to the panel.
Well, I'm glad that you went through it in the way that you did, because it made clear that this is not a situation where it can be like, we got it wrong. Okay, well, let's set everything right now. Like, many people lost their lives. I mean, who knows how many people were injured in the chaos that was caused by this group leaping on what they found to be irregularities conveniently, and everyone just saying, yeah, no, that must be it. Let's not wait even a second to check to find out. Let's just assume that that's it, because that's the outcome we want. We're gonna drive him out of the country, and if some people have to lose their lives along the way, you can't overthrow a regime without breaking some eggs.
And this is a part of the Trump administration and many in the political establishment obsessing over making sure that South America has right-leaning leaders, far-right leaders in many cases. We're seeing this. Why Donald Trump says Venezuela with every breath is because he wants a right-winger to be installed in the presidency there in Venezuela. And here in Bolivia, it was the same deal, and they were able to be successful because now Morales is in Mexico seeking asylum there and being kept there, and he was undemocratically. It was a coup. It was a coup. He was kicked out of the office.
The way this always works, I mean, how much can Americans independently verify or not verify what's coming? They say, OAS said so. So there's, we talked before about election politics and the amount of stuff people know about just what's within and close enough within reach. Things like this makes it easy to say, okay, so we saw some irregularities. There's this official entity that is determined there's irregularities, so therefore that's the case. Really, how many Americans are gonna look up and go, yeah, let's look into that a little further. Let me research that deeper and find out really where this is. It's not really gonna happen, so it makes it an easy approach to do it this way.
Yeah, and you just have to scream socialism, Venezuela, it's all. But the Bolivian president, Morales, the former Bolivian president, had lifted so many out of poverty and was quite popular and successful there. And again, as the first indigenous leader of the country, it was really important to have him as a figurehead there. But let's just get a little bit more into the Washington Post findings, because I think it's really important to break down why the irregularities, the purported irregularities, actually didn't amount to anything that even came close to election fraud. So the Bolivian constitution requires that the candidate either earn an outright electoral majority or 40% of the votes with at least a 10 percentage point lead. Otherwise, a runoff election will take place. The preliminary count halted with 84% of the vote counted when Morales had a 7.87 percentage point lead. Though the halt was consistent with election officials' earlier promise to count at least 80% of the preliminary vote on election night and continue through the official count, the OAS quickly expressed concern over the stop. When the preliminary count resumed, Morales' margin was above the 10 percentage point threshold. There is not any statistical evidence of fraud that we can find, the researchers. The trends of the preliminary count, the lack of any big jump in support for Morales after the halt, and the size of Morales's margin all appear legitimate. All in all, the OAS's statistical analysis and conclusions would appear deeply flawed. Now, the OAS has been around for a while. They, during the Cold War, were seen as trying to cut down leftist organizations throughout the Americas and the Western Hemisphere and supporting more right-wing or centrist, and by organizations I actually meant governments. So this is kind of a return to form for them, and so that's why a lot of people on the left were questioning their jump to question the results, and it seems like, and not seems like, we were proven correct in that instance.
Yeah, I'm curious. Obviously, like a lot of people, I greeted the day with this news. It seemed really big. As you're doing your research for the show, it's in the Washington Post. Let's bear that in mind. I mean, the Washington Post is not going to publish something like this without looking into it, confirming that it's true. For their news, their op-eds are a totally different story. But anyway, this seems like it should send shockwaves through the news organizations that helped to prop up the claims against Morales back 5 months ago at this point, and that hypothetically we should now be looking to some sort of political reconciliation, an attempt to make good on what has been revealed. Are we seeing any indications of that?
That would require the media to care about people in South America, John. That would require them to care about them as like outside of the context of propping up United States hegemony and the ability of industry, oil, natural gas, other industries to run rampant over that region, which Morales was instrumental in preventing.
Usually politicians have political capital that they have left to spend, and they have to use it in certain ways, especially when you're first in office. But the tables have turned so much. When you ask that question about whether or not media will, in a large part, look into this further, it's one of those things like they get berated enough by this administration. Many times beaten into submission to make sure we don't say things a certain way or cover things a certain way, or else we're gonna get some kind of negative attention. Whether or not they push back or not, they just don't want the negative attention. So it even makes it harder with well, we can't really waste so much of our capital on looking into this further, because how many people are really gonna care? And then afterwards, we're gonna get berated again. This president's gonna go to the next event and start pointing at us and say, them out there. And we just don't want to deal with it. There's many other things to work with. We got an election. It's all perfect timing for things like this to come out and would seemingly be important and just absolutely not end up that way.
Yeah, and I would just briefly say, I hope that the media will show a little bit more caution and a little bit more suspicion towards the initial official line if, for instance, November rolls around and the Trump administration, someone comes out, Secretary of State, and says, you know what, we're seeing some irregularities in these votes. We should probably shut this thing down.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll take that seriously. I mean, the experience of the 2000 election implies that we won't. And that if it turns out later, the Washington Post has analysis showing that no, Bernie did win, that you don't get a do-over. Like they halted the recount in Florida, and when it turned out that Al Gore should have won, they didn't switch the presidency over. So just have a little bit of caution, a little bit of suspicion when you're sold a line like this.